It's time for the Sports Blitz, the only live-streamed local sports show in Arkansas, with all the latest on the sports stories that matter to you.
Welcome into the Sports Blitz on a Wednesday. Maddie's got his production mode on. He was in here yesterday for the Woodshed. We hope you're enjoying that show. And he was giving them the finger point, and they messed it up every time. It was like, whose turn is it to bring us back from break? And they just messed it up every time. So when he pushed the button, and normally he goes 3, 2, and then he like points at me. He goes 3, 2, just like pushing the buttons. It was the most disjointed but awesome. You couldn't see it because you're not behind the camera and not in front of the camera. So I apologize, but welcome into the Sports Blitz on a Wednesday. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Maddie Lassiter in the Cogswell Motors studios. We are looking forward to a good hour of sports talk. Want to know what you have to say. 968 News is the number if you want to get in touch with the show. That's 968-6397. We've got some local sports. We've got some state sports. We've got some national sports. And we continue the Mount Rushmore conversation we've been having for a little while. I think we've had a different spin on it. Seems like every show, but I think this is a fun one. We want to get your take. Go to facebook.com/sportsblitz or find us on Twitter at RealMarkFreeman, at Weldon Braxton, and let us know what you think about the following question. This is our CrossFit Russellville poll question. If you had to give a Mount Rushmore, now we're going to do 3 separate Mount Rushmores today. Now, I know this is the hot topic. You may be getting tired of it, but bear with us today because I think this is going to be a fun conversation. If you had to give a Mount Rushmore for Arkansas basketball, Arkansas football, and Arkansas athletics as a whole, who would you put on those 3 separate mountains? That's 4 different names for each one. So I think that'll be a fun conversation today. And Weldon, we've got high school basketball tournaments starting to heat up. You got some favorites falling. We've got college basketball, NBA, all kinds of stuff going on right now.
Yeah, we really do, Mark, and I'm looking forward to today's show. You mentioned we've got our own take on the whole Mount Rushmore conversation, and it's one of those things that, it comes around ever so often, and you talk it to death for a few days or a week, and it kind of goes away, and we'll get it back off the shelf in a year or so. But, it's that time of year where we're having it. This started with, LeBron James's comments about, his Mount Rushmore. Now it's spun all the way to talking about Arkansas Razorback Mount Rushmore. So I look forward to that. Basketball game tonight, a huge one tonight. South Carolina's not a name opponent, but again, there are some things you need to be careful of. It is an opponent who's inferior, so you worry about focus and make sure the mindset is right. The crowd may not be ideal due to the quality of the opponent and the late start. It is an 8 o'clock tip tonight. It's not your typical 7 o'clock midweek start. So I think Arkansas's got to be careful. We know they can't afford to lose the game against South Carolina. So, yeah, that's one I'm looking forward to as well.
Yeah, I was looking at Twitter before the show, and there are some upset folks because the basketball game on CST is being preempted by an LSU baseball game. So the first half, they say, up to the first half of the game will not be shown live on TV. They'll have to jump in whenever they can get in. I think it'll be on ESPN3, but, I've had my issues with ESPN3 where stuff's been blacked out or stuff's just been not showing when they say it's going to.
Right.
And that's not going to be fun. But Arkansas, South Carolina, it's going to happen regardless, but it is a late start tonight.
Late start, and then you have to get creative with how you watch the game.
Yeah.
So sometimes when stuff's not on, you got to get creative.
And we don't necessarily have to tell you how to get creative because I don't want to be on the record telling you how to break the law. But
who said
if you want to find out how to get a hold of the game, there are places that you could get a hold of the game if that is your prerogative. Good call, Maddie. That's the word I was looking for. All right, let's jump in real quickly to our local sports look. We've got high school basketball taking place throughout the week. Some makeup games still being done. Conway, Russellville on Monday. A heartbreaker for the Cyclones as they fell to a big rival. And then last night they played bounce back. 2 nights in a row you're playing. That's got to be tough on the legs. They played Southside last night, got the win. So the Cyclones still trying to hang in there in the thick of things, knowing that here in a couple weeks they get to play in the 6A state tournament. Now they still got the Little Rock schools, but they won't be seeing the North Sides anymore. They won't be worried about some of these Little Rock Hall Don't be worried about some of those teams. They'll have to deal with Parkview and Jonesboro, and that's not going to be any fun. But they've got the 6A state tournament coming up here in a couple weeks, and they're just trying to round into form.
They are, Mark. I thought it was an opportunity for Russellville. You look at having to play back-to-back games. I think if you were to order those games in a specific way, you would have rather it be the way it was. You'd rather play Conway when you have fresher legs than play a weaker Southside on more tired legs. So they had a chance, but I said it on Monday. Russellville's got to be careful because I noted that Conway was playing well coming in. They had played Little Rock Hall tough, a lot tougher than what people thought. They were coming in, off a victory, so they were feeling pretty well. I was wondering if Russellville would be ready. I know it was a close game throughout. Conway pulled it out in the end, but as you said, Mark, Russellville still has the Class 6A tournament to look forward to.
Yeah, and Russellville, if you haven't seen them play, they're a fun team to watch if you like guards and you like three-pointers because they shoot a lot of threes. And it's sort of one of those things, you live by the three and you die by the three. Sometimes you're able to play well and hit a lot of threes. I think they hit 10 threes in the first half of the Conway game. And they were ahead, through three quarters, and they just didn't have enough at the end. Sometimes the threes just stop falling. And we're going to talk about another team here in a minute who's kind of dealing with that same thing. But Russellville, they don't have a whole lot of presence inside. But, going into the 6A state tournament, they just want to have everything lined out, know who they can count on, know who's going to contribute, have their rotations figured out. And that's kind of the blessing in disguise as far as everybody getting in to the 6A state tournament.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it does give everybody a clean slate. It does give you something to look forward to if you're having an up-and-down season, sort of the way we see in the NFL. You can have a team who's struggling throughout the regular season or a team who's dealing with injuries, yet they finally get it going the last few games, get into the playoffs, and then make a run. So there's both sides to it, Mark. I always favor a smaller playoff. Always favor when teams are consistent throughout the season. They're rewarded by playing other consistent teams. But, this format allows teams to get hot and make a run at it.
And on the flip side, sometimes you see some really, really bad teams that have to go to the state tournament, and they would probably rather not even be there. I'm not trying to be mean. I mean, there was a team, I think it was last year in girls basketball. It was like J.A. Fair and Little Rock Hall or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And it was like 80-something to 50 or to like 15 or 20. It was just absolute murder. And you hate to have to see that. And luckily, Russellville hasn't necessarily been in that situation. Now the girls are gonna have trouble in the state playoffs because they've lost their best player to an ACL, and they were struggling before. So they're trying to bounce back from a couple of years ago. They're still sort of paying the piper as far as a couple years ago. Their 7 best players, all seniors, the only players who really played, graduated, and they haven't gained enough experience at the high school level yet to really compete. So they're sort of paying for that state championship game appearance, and I don't think they'd trade it, but they obviously are struggling right now in girls basketball, but we hope that they're able to get hot right now at the right time and play well coming down the stretch. Moving on to the 5A, Clarksville. Panthers got beat last night, lost to Valonia, a close one on the road. We talked about this game a couple weeks ago, how Clarksville and Valonia was a tight one at Pantherland. And, Valonia has, I don't want to say they have a blueprint, but they've sort of got a way that they go about business that gives Clarksville problems. It's physical, it's guys who can shoot and make shots, and guys who are just going to rough you up. Right. And when, Clarksville didn't hit but 2 threes last night. Freddie Lee and Casey Benton hit threes last night, but that was it. And then, they talk about some questionable officiating. I wasn't there, so I didn't get to see it. But those things all work together on the road to equal a loss for this team. And, who knows? Maybe this will be an eye-opener. We said that about the Morrilton loss. I said it about the Valonia win in the first place, that Valonia looked very good, very well coached, very well put together as far as the way their team was. And I thought that they would be a tough one for Clarksville. For some reason, they haven't been that good against anybody else. They're on the fringe of making the playoffs in the 5A West, which is very deep and very good this year. You've got Clarksville, Morrilton, Alma, Harrison, Valonia right there, and even Greenbrier to an extent right there in the conversation for the playoffs. But Valonia sort of feels like they match up well against Clarksville, and they got them last night.
Yeah, they did, Mark, and we knew that Clarksville had to play well well if they wanted to win at Valonia. They gave the Panthers trouble when they went to Pantherland. The thing, you're playing a team like Clarksville, I think it's difficult to beat them in a run-and-gun matchup. That's why I think a team like Alma, as good as they are, I don't know if I foresee them, the way things are constructed now, being able to beat Clarksville just because, that's a similar style of play in terms of tempo. I mean, they may not do all the same things, but you look at a Valonia team, they're going the complete opposite way. They're trying to be physical. They're trying to grind it out. And if you can take care of the ball against a team that likes to pressure and execute your offense against a team and you don't give them easy layups consistently, you're going to stay in the game. And as you said, Mark, Clarksville's cold shooting ultimately fed into it. I think if they were shooting at a clip that's more normal for them, they would probably have been in that game even tighter and possibly won it. So, we know what the Panthers is about shooting. They do a lot of things well, but, they got to hit their shots.
Yeah, somebody told me they shot probably 25%. Actually, I saw it on Fearless Friday. I saw that Valonia fans said, Clarksville just didn't shoot very well tonight. So, that had obviously had something to do with it. And I was talking to somebody else last night, and, last year in the Jacksonville game, the state semifinals, Clarksville had the worst shooting game I'd seen them have in several years. It would have gone back 2 years from then, 3 years from now, to when they played Prairie Grove in the regional tournament. They won the game, but it was the ugliest game ever. They had a box and one. No, it was a triangle and two. Junk defense that they threw at Clarksville, and they guarded Devin Sims and they guarded Dedrick Lee, and then they just kind of let everybody else. They played the triangle on everybody else, and they made Clarksville make shots, and it was a tough one. It was like a 40-something, 30-something game final score. They held the ball and ran 2-3 minute possessions, and that's sort of something that they wanted to do to keep Clarksville from getting them out and running and taking the ball from them, and that's sort of what what teams have been able to have success with Clarksville have done. I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of that in the state tournament as I'm looking at the brackets, and they could match up with a Forest City who would probably want to pound it inside to Trey Thompson, but they like to get up and go a little bit, and from what I've heard, their guards aren't that great. But then Jacksonville, they're still the same as they've always been, 8, 9, 10 guys that'll play, and they'll just run them in and out and, constantly try to go. But there are some things that people have taken advantage of with Clarksville. The lack of depth. They only got 6 or 7 guys that'll play. That's kind of becoming a problem for people. I've heard people also talking about how if they can get Clarksville in foul trouble, then they can get one of these starters off the floor, and then you can kind of take advantage of that. So I'm hoping, as a Panther alum and a proud supporter, that they're able to get that together. They can get Morrilton. They've got Harrison on Friday at home, then they've got Morrilton next Tuesday at home before traveling to Huntsville to finish out the season, the regular season, next Friday. They're going to make the state playoffs. It's all determining now, whether or not they'll be a 1 or 2 seed. Now, if the wheels fell off, they could end up 3 or 4 seed, but is probably going to be a 1 or 2 depending on that Morrilton game. Morrilton now 10-1 in conference, Clarksville 9-2.
Yeah, and you mentioned about when Clarksville played a few years ago, people making them shoot. And I just think there's a difference between taking shots that come from inside out basketball that are in rhythm, and then when teams are just making you take shots and you're out of rhythm. I think there's a difference there, and I think that's what's effective. But you got to be on top of your game. We can talk about employing different strategies. Keep them out of the paint. Wear them out. All this stuff sounds good if you can execute it, but they've had this stuff thrown at them before. Teams have tried to slow them down before. Teams have tried to get into their bench before, and they haven't been successful doing it. Clarksville's won for the most part, so I think they're in good shape. I mean, they're not a flawless team, but I think they'll certainly be in the mix in Class 5A.
Got to hit some shots. Got to get some good play from the guards and from the bigs. Just everybody's got to play a little better. Harrison got a 20-point win over Alma last night at home, and that's a big one for the Goblins, knowing they're coming into Clarksville on Friday, and they're still fighting for a state playoff berth. I think they've got I saw somebody just a minute ago post that if they win one of their final 3 games, that they'll make the state tournament. So they'll be a 3 or 4 seed, which is kind of where they were last year. I think it was Clarksville, Alma, Harrison was the 3, and Huntsville was the 4, if I'm not mistaken, out of the 5A West. So they're trying to make the playoffs. They'll make some noise. They made the semifinals last year. So Harrison not going to be an easy out for Clarksville coming up Friday, but that's going to be a good game there in Pantherland. And then also Pottsville Apaches looks like they're going to play tomorrow night. The games tonight will determine who they play. Boonville and Subiaco play at 5:30. The Boonville Bearcats beat Mena 51-47 last night. A big shout out to the Dardanelle Sand Lizards boys for winning 57-47 over Dover. That's going to be the end of Dover's season there in the 4A4 district tournament at Pottsville. But the Dardanelle Sand Lizards move on. They take on Waldron tonight at 8:30. So you've got Dover Maumelle girls at 4 o'clock. You've got Subiaco Boonville at 5:30. That winner gets to play Pottsville in boys action. Dardanelle Waldron girls at 7 o'clock, and then Waldron Dardanelle boys at 8:30 tonight in the 4A4 district tournament. So it's getting real there in the 4A4.
Yeah. Teams are being eliminated. You mentioned Dover's season is over, and the IU, you've got, teams who are competing for further postseason slots, who's also their bacon's on the line a little bit too. We know Pottsville's competing for seeding. We know the top of that 4A4, what it looks like, the usual suspects. Subiaco Academy, Maumelle, Pottsville, all vying. Pottsville does have an opportunity in their gym if they can get the job done. So, that's a race I want to watch. I want to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun week or so of action there. It's good that that Pottsville's got the tournament at home so that they can have a legitimate chance at getting a good seed going into regional. The regional tournament for the 4A North is in Lincoln, so they've got their work cut out for them in the next couple weeks, but they're looking to move forward. One more thing for junior high sports. It looks like both Russellville junior high teams are ready to come together. They're ready to come together as one school, both of them out of their respective junior high tournament there, the River Valley League. And then Dardanelle Junior High made the finals in 4A4 junior high basketball action, so a big congratulations to them. Jared White and the squad there beat Pottsville, two-time defending conference champion there in junior high action. Congratulations to Coach Garrett Hill as well. It was a good run for them, and they're going to continue to be there every year like they are. We're going to look at the NBA, the Olympics, a couple of controversial wire topics, and then we'll get to our Mount Rushmores right after the break.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
here's what you missed.
Updated news.
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
Developing stories.
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
And weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance of rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on. KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out RiverValleyLeader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Talking to the microphone if it's not here. 968 News. 968-6397 is how you get involved in the Sports Blitz. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Matty Lasker in the Cogswell Motors studios. And Weldon, we've talked a little NBA. We did our Mount Rushmores the other day. We did our 80s to now modern era Mount Rushmore. We did our pre-80s Mount Rushmore, and we had a whole lot of agreement, which I like because it means that everybody wants to be right like me, but then also I'd like to have some conversation. So today when we get to our Mount Rushmores, we want you to give us your thoughts as far as a Razorback basketball, Razorback football, and then overall Razorback sports, Mount Rushmore, the people you would put on those respective mountains, and we'd be interested to hear what you've got to say on those. But we'll give you ours here in a little bit. I think we're going to have some good, healthy debate and conversation, and we're going to have some differing opinions.
I think so, too. You know, the way we broke it up, and I say we broke it up fairly because of the difference of eras. We went into that on Monday. It made it a lot easier. I'll say that, too. It was fair, but it made it a lot easier. I understand there were some outstanding names we left off the old school list. I mean, you look at a Walt Clyde Frazier, you look at some of the older guys, Bob Cousy, the Bob Pettits of the world, Jerry Lucas. I mean, the list goes on and on. Same in the modern days. I mean, we left off with Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan. I mean, there's a lot of great players that we left off. But I think we were in agreement there. With Razorback sports and what we're doing now, I think it's different because there's a different perspective to it. But I think you're looking at, well, what impact did they have on the program, or maybe how successful were they? Because you have some coaches and players who are really successful, but were they transcendent athletes in terms of putting the overall program to the next level nationally, or did they just quietly win versus somebody who didn't win as much, but maybe their winning had a greater impact? So I think those are the things we have to weigh out.
It's going to be a fun conversation here in a little bit, but let's look at the NBA right now. We talked about how to fix the dunk contest. We've talked about All-Star Weekend. But really now we're upon the trade deadline is upon us, where we've got several conversations going on in the NBA front offices right now. And they're probably more behind the scenes than what we're even hearing about. But we're seeing that Pau Gasol, Rajon Rondo, Kevin Love, even Luol Deng, all sort of on the block right now. I don't think all of them get moved. I really think Pau Gasol should get moved.
Yeah.
I think if the Minnesota Timberwolves are smart, they'll get what they can for Kevin Love because he's not going to stay very long. And I think, from what I'm hearing, that the Toronto Raptors are really interested in getting Rajon Rondo. So we could have an interesting final couple days before the trade deadline.
We could, Mark. I think, though, to your point, I don't think we'll see as much of an explosion as we could. And the two names that stick out to me are Love and Rondo, because they're under contract another year. So they could still move them. They still need to, but there's not as much urgency. You still have Rondo for another year, although I don't think Boston's going to be any more competitive, so you can make the case that, what's the difference between now and next year? Same with Kevin Love. He's under contract through next year as well. But I agree with you. I don't think Kevin Love is staying. Odds are Rondo probably won't stay. Gasol is the interesting piece. His contract is expiring. He is somebody who can help a team out. But the Lakers' asking price is something you have to take into consideration. Draft picks normally get tossed around, like yesterday's trash, but you're talking about a draft class that many people think could rival a class we talked about, the 03 class before the show. It may not be that good, but a lot of people love this draft more than many in recent years. So people want to hold on to their picks. They want as many as possible. That may be an obstacle.
I saw ESPN's Tom Penn talk about trading Pau Gasol to the Phoenix Suns for Emeka Okafor's expiring contract and the Pacers' first-round pick, which will be the 29th, 30th pick in the draft, as the Pacers we expect to go to the Eastern Conference Finals at least, so that will put them in the final 4 picks of the first round. So it's not going to be a great pick. It's going to be a late first-round pick. So including that in the package for Pau Gasol wouldn't be too hard for me to do if I were the GM. It would be the conversation of whether or not we could get him to continue, to sign a new contract. At least consider that. If he would at least consider playing with the young talent, the Goran Dragic and the Morris twins and some of the Archie Goodwin, even some of the young talent that the Phoenix Suns have. He may not want to go through a rebuilding process, but the Suns are pretty good right now, so maybe he would consider it. If I could get him to at least consider it, I might do that, pull that trigger if I'm the Phoenix Suns.
I think it's something to consider, and I think if you're Pau Gasol, to your point, I think you got to look at your market value. I think you got to understand that, if I do go out on the open market, how much can I make? What kind of role do people want me in? I am getting a little bit older. You got to weigh that out too. The financial ramifications. This is a different topic, so to speak, but let's talk with the Miami Heat. Dwayne Wade, if he can opt in for more money than he'd make on the open market, but is that good for the team? Is he going to command that type of salary where it really hamstrings what Miami can do? And if so, if you're LeBron James, can you stick around for that? That's a whole nother conversation. But just as far as Gasol goes, you got to understand your market value. You got to understand the role that teams will let you play.
Speaking of the Miami Heat,
glad
you brought that up. LeBron had 42 last night in a 117-106 win over the Dallas Mavericks. I'm a little worried still about Dwayne Wade's health. I don't know if he's playing possum or if he's just not quite healthy. Just a litany of injuries. Every time I think about Dwayne Wade injuries and where he is right now, I think of his career and how many times he's hit the floor,
right.
How many times he's dove for a loose ball, and he's just been all over the place as far as physically. He's been, it's catching up to him now. Knee issues and things like that. So it kind of worries me whether or not he can come back and play well. But LeBron James, the conversation now has become, is LeBron James doing what he's doing? He's had several good games in a row now, both before the All-Star break and this one, the first one out of it. 42 points, 11 in a row in the fourth quarter win. Apparently, now I heard this on First Take this morning, he came back into the game with the Dallas Mavericks up 3 points, and some guys on the Mavericks bench chirping at him, telling him, you can't shoot, you ain't any good. They're still giving him stuff from the 11 finals. And LeBron scores 11 points in a row about like that.
Yeah.
3 threes and a layup to put the Heat up for good. It looks like he's taken a little bit of exception to that, and also the Kevin Durant locked up the MVP conversation that a lot of people have had. You and I both sort of agree that Kevin Durant still the MVP favorite right now for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
But LeBron James, it looks like he's starting to get a little fired up right now.
LeBron James is, and I think if you're Dallas, I'm not even sure how many of those players were on the 11 team, but you can make the case that it worked in 11. So they figure they'd try it again, but LeBron had 0 rings back then. He now has a couple. A lot has changed. You're not going to get to him that way. I agree. I think the Kevin Durant conversation has sparked him. I think it's made him take his game from being a great level to an even greater level. Kevin Durant is still the MVP just because not only has he done freakish things in terms of his scoring and his rebounds and assists, but he's done it without Westbrook. And I know you can say that's helped him because he's got more opportunities, but Russell Westbrook's an outstanding player. I've criticized him before. I stand by my criticisms of him. I think they were valid, but at the same time, he's an outstanding player. If you're going to win a championship, you do need a talent like him to get it done, but at the same time, it's got to mesh with Kevin Durant. So I think ultimately it put more of the onus on KD to get the job done, and he has. That's why, really, for me, he's become the MVP, but we'll see. LeBron is in it.
Thursday, it looks like Russell Westbrook's coming back as Miami and Oklahoma City lock up. I think that's going to be a fun one to watch. I could see this going one of two ways. I could see Oklahoma City and Miami being a classic, one of the all-time great games where you're just like, wow, this is or I could see it being a February regular season game where neither team really cares that much. Oklahoma City's trying to get him back involved. Dwayne Wade doesn't play or plays very little.
Yeah.
So I could see it going one of two ways. I'll be interested, though. I'll pay attention to that game because if both teams do, take some pride in it and it turns out to be a really good game, you could find out some stuff about the future. Now, it will be Russell Westbrook's first game back. I'll be interested to see how many shots he takes because Kevin Durant has just been going nuts in the time he's been gone, and his numbers are really, in the time that Russell Westbrook's been gone, they're better than LeBron-esque. He's been averaging 8 rebounds, 7 assists a game with 34 of 35 points a night. So he's just been incredible, and I have to give him a lot of credit for that. Before I go any further, did you see, and we talked about this pre-show, so I'm asking him a question that I know he knows the answer to, but did you see where the guy on the radio, I called him crazy before the show, talked about how Carmelo Anthony could end up in Miami. If these guys would take $14 million apiece, there'd have to be some roster shakeups. Obviously, guys like Mario Chalmers, who makes $4 million a year, and I like having on this team. he'd have to go bye-bye because their salary would be next to nothing. But Carmelo to the Miami Heat, your thoughts?
I can't see it. Look, I like Carmelo Anthony more than a lot of people. Look, I think he's one of the few great players in the NBA that the conversation is usually more negative than positive. But he deserves that criticism. But I think if he were to play with the LeBron James from a basketball standpoint, it could work just because Carmelo's versatility. He can get the job done outside the paint area, and LeBron James is the unspoken leader. So Carmelo, for the first time in his career, would be outside of the leadership position, which I think is where he needs to be. But with that being said, from a financial standpoint, from a roster standpoint, I just can't see it. You're talking about 4. I know they would be taking less money, but essentially 4 max-type players on your team, and you look at how you have to fill out the rest of that roster. I'll say it right now. You can take the 4 best players in basketball, whatever 4 players you want, and if you put them with, let's say, below D-League caliber players to fill out the rest of that roster, they won't win the championship. There's no way. You don't have to have greatness top to bottom on your team, but you need some semblance of support. I feel like Miami's done a great job of flirting with that line of players who are just good enough that they can afford. They're cheap enough, but they're also not downright terrible. And I think if you add a 4th superstar, you now have to dip below that level to where you're going to have some really not very good basketball players contributing to your team significantly. And I just don't think you can win that way.
You want a case in point for putting 4 of the best players in the world on the same team and them not being able to get it done? Look no further than the 2003-2004 Los Angeles Lakers. You got Shaq and Kobe still arguably in their prime. Obviously, Kobe was, but Shaq was sort of on his way down. He was in his 12th year. But then you get Gary Payton, and you get Karl Malone, and you get basically fill-ins. Derek Fisher was still there, and he was good. Rick Fox, Devin George. There were some, fill-in guys, but they didn't have anybody else. And they get to the finals. They played well enough to get to the NBA Finals, and then they got worked 4-1 by a team. The Detroit Pistons. I know you like this. The Detroit Pistons.
Well, I love that Piston team. That's why, as much as I respect the Spurs now, couldn't stand them back in 2005 when they denied the Pistons back-to-back titles. But you look at, even if you do have, let's say, the 4 players themselves, forget about the role players, the 4 players themselves are going to have to alter their game and concede so much. Chris Bosh, we talked about, has already altered his game to a degree. He was a consistent all-star. He's still an all-star in Miami, but I just think it's more through association. I mean, he's putting up numbers, but he was the guy in Toronto. He's altered his game. Dwayne Wade has altered his game. He used to have the ball in his hands at all times, the guy. And, even LeBron, playing with other guys, has done some things differently. Now you want to add a Carmelo who, even though he'll be a better player because he has LeBron's leadership and Dwayne Wade, he's still going to take his shots. Yep. I just think it's too much.
Never going to happen.
Yeah, I just think it's too much.
Never going to happen. All right, we got to hit a break. When we come back, we're going to look a little bit at the Olympics. I just want to spend as little time as possible talking about Sochi, but it's happening. And years from now, when we look back at this time, we want people to know that the Winter Olympics were going on in 2014 on February the 19th.
Yeah, I have concerns about the Olympics I will voice.
And also some Back to the Future news we heard from the Woodshed yesterday. I thought it was pretty cool. We'll talk about that right after the break.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
Here's what you missed.
updated news,
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
developing stories,
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
and weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley.
offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out rivervalleyleader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
We're on the downhill slope for the second half of the Sports Blitz today. And as I say, slope, welcome back into the Sports Blitz, where we're going to talk about the Olympic Games, the Winter Olympics. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Maddie Lassiter, Sochi. Go to Twitter and search hashtag Sochi Probs. You'll see some of the stuff that's going on over there as they spend all these billions of dollars. Team gets knocked out in the hockey playoff tournament where they're not going to medal, and they're not real happy about that. But they may or may not have a doorknob, may or may not have a shower curtain, may or may not have a hotel room at all. The media people still griping about it, but the Sochi Olympics, they're still going on. The U.S. doing well enough in the medal count to keep people a little bit engaged, but I know you and I aren't big Winter Olympic fans.
No, I mean, here's my Olympic philosophy, and I heard Mike Greenberg say it this morning on ESPN, so I got to give him the credit. Well, I mean, it was my point originally. He just said it nationally.
He took it from you.
So he'll get the credit for it. But my Olympic philosophy has always been this. I always cheer for the sports in which the Olympics are the pinnacle of that sport. And so, when you look at the Summer Olympics, that's why swimming and track and field, that's what really captivates me, because nobody talks about Michael Phelps or Ryan Lochte and all the years in between except when the Olympics come around. And the same thing about, the track stars. Now, Usain Bolt has made himself into a transcendent figure. We hear about him here and there, but not much. Then Michael Phelps, when he's engaging in recreational activity, we'll hear from him. But, for the most part, those are the sports I love to watch in the Olympics. Basketball, I love watching the stars, the guys we know and love. I love watching them compete for the gold, but it doesn't really move me the way those other sports do. And hockey is the same way. I mean, it's all about the Stanley Cup. It's all about, what's going on in the NHL. But I like the fact that the United States is the underdog, so to speak. You have Russia, you have Canada, you have all these, hockey nations, and the U.S., they're just kind of dipping their toe in it. Although if you go up in the part of the country where I spend time, hockey is like it is in Canada, Russia, anywhere else, but for the rest of the country. So the point I'm making, Mark, is I'm a little bit concerned for the Russian hockey team because
they may be missing.
They're the host team. In one of the marquee sports in hockey, and they didn't win, and the government really wanted them to win, and that's all I'm saying. Yeah. I'm a little concerned.
Well, did you see? I don't know if you saw the tweet, the picture of the of Putin and some other guy. I don't know who he was, Medvedev or something like that. They're sitting there just like, is this really happening? Spend all this money, and you jokers who are the most loaded, team talent-wise. Yeah. I mean, you could argue Canada and the United States, both pretty good. Yeah. But Russia got a lot of talent on that hockey roster, and, you may end up never hearing from some of them again.
Yeah. U.S. got the Czech Republic. From what I understand, they've traditionally struggled against the Czech Republic, so it'll be a tough one in the quarterfinals, I guess.
Yeah, up 2-1 right now.
Up 2-1 right now, so hopefully they can finish that off.
Yeah, U.S. 1 medal behind Russia and the Netherlands, 21 right now. Well, those two are at 22 apiece. The U.S. has 7 gold medals, which is third behind Norway's 9 and Germany's 8. And, I think that with the U.S., the sheer number of Olympians competing will probably end up high in the medal count, if not winning it outright. But the U.S. just scored against 3-1 hockey Don't ever tell us we didn't do anything for you. We told you about hockey.
All right,
but anyway, yeah, there's the Winter Olympics fix. If you need anything else, turn to NBC. KRK, Channel 4, content partner, River Valley Leader. We heard about on the Woodshed yesterday, it was yesterday, about a crazy invention that is coming through right now, patent processing. Nike has applied for a patent for self-tying shoes. Now, without seeing the shoe itself, I did see a little bit of a prototype on the patent. Maddie was joking about how in 2015 in Back to the Future, the movie, that they've got self-tying shoes, and I thought it was kind of cool. And then I saw the shoe, and it's the most hideous-looking thing I've ever seen. It's like you know how they're doing with basketball shoes now? They're having them all the way up, like mid-calf almost, just like way up there.
Yeah.
It's that kind of shoe, and then I don't know how it's supposed to work, but self-tying shoes, man, we're getting into the crazy Twilight Zone era.
And I can imagine how much those shoes are going to cost.
Yeah,
too.
oh yeah. Just because they say self-tying.
Exactly. Here's my philosophy, and I was telling Maddie this during the break. Look, I love new inventions. I love technology. I love inventions that make my life better. And I guess technically self-tying shoes improves your life, but how much does it really? I mean, do you have a list of errands saying, man, I got to go to the bank, I got to go to the grocery store, I got to do all this stuff, but I don't have time because I have to tie my shoes. If there was only something that would help me save that time. I mean, look, it's a cool invention, it's cool technology, I'll give you that, but is it really improving our lives?
It's going to improve the lives of some Nike folks who are going to make some bank.
And you know what's sad about that? Because some people are going to just race to the store and just buy them up. Forget about how they can't pay the water bill or the electric bill.
Yeah, they're going to stand in line for hours.
They're going to stand in line for some self-tying Nike shoes. But that's a whole nother soliloquy I could do.
You know what's going to be funny is when somebody takes them back because they won't work. The shoes won't tie themselves. Take these back. They don't tie themselves. Well, buddy, you can learn how to tie them. I never learned. Eventually, that's going to be the deal. That's going to be the thing. We're going to have self-tying shoes. People are going to forget how to loop, swoop, and pull. All right, let's move on. That was just for fun. Let's move on to one more wire topic. We'll probably have to hit the break after this, and we'll look at our Mount Rushmores in the final segment. Rick Pitino found out today on Mike and Mike that he had a conversation with those guys about how he believes that social media is, quote, poisoning athletes' minds. I can see how that would have an impact for a couple different reasons. One, you hear so much junk that's just talked from everybody, and everybody, I made a blog post about this, got a lot of crap for it, about the internet tough guys, guys who want to anonymously talk a whole bunch of stuff for no good reason because they know nobody will figure out who they are. And a lot of times athletes have to deal with that, and you have to be grown up enough to be able to get past that. But then on the flip side, they're learning how to speak in a Twitterese or Facebook text language where they don't even learn how to use proper punctuation and proper spelling and things like that. And I don't know that that's necessarily what Rick Pitino was getting at, but I thought it was an interesting conversation nonetheless.
And actually, I think he was. I heard him this morning on Mike and Mike, and he went further into it. I understand the point about some of the lost arts of conversation in terms of anytime. Look, I text. I'm in the younger generation. We do it, but I'm not one of those people who text when I'm in the same room with somebody, texting that person. That when I heard people do that, that's just too much for me. If I'm in the room, we'll talk. But there's just certain values. Patino brought up the point about what if you're talking to an HR person about getting a job. Basic skills that you kind of lose because you're used to texting people. In the world of dating, you ask somebody out via text. I mean, there was a time when that was flat out embarrassing. Mm-hmm. You was no kind of a man if you were texting to ask somebody out, or even worse, dare I say, break up with somebody via text message. That's even more pathetic. But that's the way the world is. I mean, from an athletic standpoint, I would just say it's an issue. The kids are so plugged into it for non-athletic reasons, just social reasons, that it's going to be very difficult to say you can't read. As a coach, you can say no tweeting, it's a team policy. But you don't have to, tweet to be able to read what people are saying. And I don't think they're going to be able to separate themselves enough to not read what's being said. Yeah,
with message boards and social media and all that, it's going to be hard for people to not see that stuff. I see people that use that as motivation. I see people who say, all right, you're calling me every name in the book. I'm just going to chalk that up in the old mind and go play well. But I do see another issue, and the other side of it is just like the dumbing down of America as far as just not knowing how to do basic things. I've got kids that, in my church youth group who couldn't spell their name. It's crazy. And part of that's the educational system. My wife's going to kill me. She's a high school teacher. But she agrees to an extent that there are some folks who I saw a picture on Facebook today of, and this is a soapbox thing, and this is not anything to do with social media, so to speak, but it was about, it had two pictures. It had 1960s and kid has bad grades, and there's teacher on this side of the desk and the parent standing beside her looking down at the kid, what's going on with these grades. And then today, and on the bottom picture, and there's the teacher sitting over here, the kid standing over here with his parents are yelling at the teacher about the bad grades, and the kid's just standing over there, a smile on his face like, I'm getting away with it. And that's sort of where we are right now, and where kids don't seem to care about education, and parents are on their side, and best friends with them don't care about. So long story short, social media can be a help, can be a hindrance. I see both things. And speaking about interviewing skills and personable skills and things like that, those are things that, one, parents are going to have to work with them on, and just help them develop in that way. Two, I took classes on interviewing in college. I learned how to ask questions in an interview. I learned how to deal with, it took speech in high school, learning how to speak without saying and I do a terrible job of it now, but I learned how to do public speaking without vocal pauses, what they call them, and learn how to ask questions, learn how to do interviews. These are things that I think are still valuable. People ought to take those classes, ought to pay attention to their parents and their teachers when they talk about those things, because they are important. But I can see where Rick Pitino's coming from with this social media discussion.
I can too, and it's one of those things that's really important. I remember my old man used to get on me about saying like I'd practice a speech, and we all do it. We'll say the so-and-so, and the so-and-so, so-and-so. Everybody does it. He cracked on me. I still do it sometimes, but he got on me for that, and it's an important skill, though, no question about it.
Spelling, man, it's one of those things that, I remember I could spell better. I'm not joking. I could spell better in 5th grade than I can today. Oh, yeah. I was the 5th grade spelling bee champ at my school. I was proud of that. Seriously, I just spelled wrong. Oh, it fixed it. I never even knew I made it wrong, so the next time I'll spell it wrong again, and it's just it's kind of funny how things have gone. All right, we got to hit a break. When we come back, our Mount Rushmores of football, basketball, and all sports.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
Here's what you missed.
updated news,
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
developing stories,
It's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
and weather and traffic on the 4s.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance of rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out RiverValleyLeader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Welcome back to the Sports Blitz. We're talking now about crazy stuff you don't even want to know. This is the microphone off talk is pretty fun. The between segments. Welcome back into Sports Blitz. This is our final segment of a Wednesday. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Matty Lassiter in the Cogswell Motors studios. Been doing a lot of Mount Rushmore in recently. I heard who was it? I'm trying to think now who it was. I want to attribute this in the right direction, but somebody asked if Mount Rushmore would even be in the Mount Rushmore of monuments, national monuments. If you had to pick four, Statue of Liberty. I don't know what else you would do. Washington Monument. National monuments. Yeah. I wonder.
Washington,
I wonder if it would be the Capitol. I don't know. Mount Rushmore may not even be on the Mount Rushmore of national monuments, but they've been everywhere. We talk about it because it's hard to do. And you talk, I want to put four people or four things or whatever it is into in a conversation where there could be hundreds. I want to break it down to four. And we've done NBA players. We've done all kinds of different things. I want to do college basketball players come March Madness time, because there was a name that was brought to me the other day that was a college basketball freak, and that'll be a fun one. But we're talking Razorbacks today. Arkansas basketball, Arkansas football, and then all sports, all representatives of the University of Arkansas. And these are fun. These are tough. You're going to disagree. That's cool. 968 News is the number if you want to get in the next 8 minutes and let us know your thoughts. But, Weldon, I thought I'd get yours first on basketball.
Basketball, Arkansas Razorbacks.
A couple of them go without saying.
Yeah.
We may have the same four.
Now, wait a minute. We didn't distinct. We were talking about coaches and players for the overall. Did we decide coaches and players for just basketball? Are we doing just players?
You can do anybody for basketball.
All right. Basketball, I went with just players. Okay. I thought about it, and
then we won't have the same one.
Well, then we got different ones.
Yeah.
But I do have a coach in my overall one, so we'll wait for that. I got to look at Corliss Williamson. I mean, you talk about, I almost said NBA Finals MVP, most outstanding player of the NCAA tournament, 1994. You talk about a player who resonated nationally. And I think when you look at my list and the ones I'm about to reveal, you're going to see my criteria about national impact. What did you do in terms of putting Razorback athletics on the map nationally to where it's part of consistent conversation? And Big Nasty, no question about it, did it. I think you have to look at Sidney Moncrief and what he was doing in the late 1970s. I mean, you talk about, a stretch of Arkansas basketball that was really successful. Look at Eddie Sutton and laying things in place. Talk about a Final Four appearance. You got to have Sidney Moncrief. And then I'm looking at Todd Day. Because Todd Day was a guy who, we remember the era of the Corliss and the Corey Beck days, but remember the foundation. You talk about Final Fours also with that group, with Lee Mayberry and Oliver Miller. So I would go with Todd Day from that group. And then a wild card, so to speak. A lot of different ways I could go. But when you win a national championship, I think you deserve consideration for an additional player. I'm going to go with Mr. Corey Beck, because this guy, you talk about a bulldog, you talk about a leader, a floor general. Who is the one player from Razorback history we wish we had back now? Corliss was great. Clinton McDaniel, we would take them all. But who's the next? We always show Corey Beck. If we had another Corey Beck, that's a legendary impact for me. That's my basketball list.
I like it. I went in a little bit of a different direction, and I put coaches on there because Weldon, he'll explain in a minute why he puts the players over the coaches, because I like what he says about this. But for the sake of conversation, I went with your impact on the university as far as in your particular sport, and I've got Nolan Richardson. I think he's going to be either the court, the practice facility, a statue. Something is going to be named after Nolan Richardson, because he's Nolan Richardson. He won the national championship for the Razorback basketball team. He is Razorback basketball as far as, we talk about the way Arkansas plays basketball, and we didn't like Stan Heath. We didn't like John Pelfrey. We got Mike Anderson back because of Nolan Richardson. He wins the national championship. He's a great coach, all-time great Hall of Famer, won at every level. I heard him talking to Bo Mattingly the other day. He's won a national championship, or a state championship in high school, won a national championship in JUCO, won a national championship in Division I college basketball. He's an all-time great. NIT as well. He's a great. Nolan Richardson on my Mount Rushmore. The other three, we agree on. Sidney Moncrief, you go back, he's an NBA great. he's a recognizable name nationwide, and that to me puts him in the conversation. Aside from what he just did with the Razorbacks, he's on Sports Illustrated's cover. He's an all-time great. Super Sid on my Mount Rushmore. Todd Day, all-time leading scorer in Razorback history, an NBA great as well. Hard not to have him on there. And then Corliss Williamson, most outstanding player of a national championship team, and all Russellville great. I mean, you can't not put a Russellville great who ends up being an NBA champion, a sixth man of the year, an all-time great at Arkansas in the conversation. He's on my Mount Rushmore. I've got a couple of interesting answers from some other people. Coach Tony Davis, Clarksville Panthers, answers Eddie Sutton, which I didn't have Eddie Sutton on my list because if I was going to go with the coach, I went with Nolan because he won the national championship. He's got Eddie Sutton, Nolan, Moncrief, and Corliss. He leaves off Day and puts on Eddie Sutton instead. I have no argument whatsoever with him doing that. Now I'm starting to get answers flowing in here, so that's good. He's giving me a football and overall as well, so we'll hear from Tony Davis here in a minute. But let's move on to football real quickly because we've just got a few minutes. I went with some players and some coaches as well.
Yeah, Mark, and to answer your point from earlier, I think when you look at coaches, there's no question their impact is significant. It's significant more than players to the point to where I think it's tough to compare. I think when you look at a coach who, if he's great, he's there over a span of decades, compared to a player who's there at the most 4 years, it's going to be hard for any great player to ever overcome a great coach when we're comparing them on Mount Rushmores. But if you talk about overall impact, Coach Richardson, basketball-wise, absolutely belongs on there, no question about it.
So, football?
My football list, another tough one, because I felt like there were some guys who stood out, and then there was a whole group of guys who were writing the same. No particular order. I got to say, this is in no particular order.
That's true.
Whatsoever.
We aren't putting these in any order because Mount Rushmore is just four faces on a mountain.
In fact, I'm going to peel backwards a little bit.
Okay.
I got to look at Darren McFadden. Darren McFadden, two-time Heisman candidate, Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas was right next to a Florida Gator, who they always have candidates, right next to an Ohio State Buckeye. Darren McFadden was in that mix. Really helped elevate the profile of Razorback athletics. And then I got to go with the guy who, maybe outside of Corliss Williamson, may be my favorite Razorback ever. The guy I love to watch. I'll sit back and get my popcorn and watch this guy play any day, and that's Matt Jones. Matt Jones
I wanted to put him on my list.
He was a freak of nature. They called him the rubber band man. I don't care if you were LSU or Auburn or any other great defense back then. He made everybody look silly. Just from an entertainment value, he's a lasting memory for me. This is where it kind of got dicey for me. I went with Steve Atwater, and you can say more because of what his overall impact was beyond, but he was an All-American in Arkansas. It's not like he was a scrub that turned great when he got to the NFL. I went with Steve Atwater, and then my final guy, I was split between the two. The guy I went with was Billy Ray Smith, All-American defensive end for Arkansas. Again, anytime you have that national impact, it resonates with me. But a guy I wanted to put on there was Chuck Dykes. Because this guy, I didn't see many of those games in the 1960s and 70s, but when I did, I love go-to guys. And Chuck was a guy that Arkansas just always went to. When they needed something on offense, critical downs, he was the guy. That resonated with me, but I went with the other four.
I've got a couple of the same people on my list, but like I said, I've got Darren McFadden, obviously going to be on my list. Like I said about impact on the university, I look past your, and it's fair or unfair, I look past your career to what you did later on. And also, I've got Frank Broyles on there because as far as football goes, there's nobody who's had a bigger impact. They've named an award after him for assistant coaches. He's won a national championship at Arkansas. He's an all-time great. I've got Nolan Richardson on the basketball list and Frank Broyles on the football list with Darren McFadden. Lance Allworth. Didn't get to watch him play. Obviously, I wasn't even alive when he played. Yeah. But just hearing about him, looking at what he did in the NFL, an all-time great in the NFL as well, he's one of those guys that there's nobody who's an Arkansas aficionado from years back who wouldn't mention Lance Allworth as an all-time great Razorback. And then my fourth one, Dan Hampton. Just because it's going a little different direction than you. I liked Matt Jones. He never really won anything. And going on to the NFL, he didn't really turn out. I know he played a different position, but Dan Hampton is a Hall of Famer. He's a college football legend, but he's an NFL Hall of Famer as well. So he meant a lot, and he still means a lot. Traveling around, being a public speaker right now, the Danimal is going to be on my list as well. So I've got Frank Broyles, D-Mac, Lance Allworth, and Dan Hampton as my football players. Quickly, our all sports. We're going to go a little over today, by the way, so let's just slow down. You guys can just turn us off if you don't want to listen to more than an hour. But our all sports, and we've got a couple questions that were brought up by Old School Baller as well. Tony Davis is football. He says Frank Broyles, D-Mac, Dan Hampton, and Steve Atwater. So our all sports Mount Rushmore.
Well, look, it was difficult in some areas, but again, I'm now going to put coaches on. I'm going to go with a Frank Broyles. Obviously what he did as a coach, what he did as an athletic director. I know things that were very messy towards the end of his tenure in football and basketball. We understand the Houston Nutt situation, how messy that was. We understand, of course, the Nolan Richardson situation. But his overall impact on this program, it's almost Godfather-like. He is maybe the most recognizable face of Razorback athletics when you ask somebody who knows sports outside the state of Arkansas. And then I'm going to go with Coach Richardson. You look at multiple Final Fours. You look at bringing home a national championship. You look at revolutionizing the way the game was played in terms of having to deal with full court pressure and not being able to run your sets the way you want to run. That has a lasting impact. And then I'm going to go with Corliss Williamson. Again, he was on my basketball list. He was the driving force of a team that brought home a rare national title in one of the major sports. And then Darren McFadden. I know Arkansas didn't win a championship, but they did go to the SEC championship game. He was a back-to-back Heisman runner-up. He had a lasting impact as well. So those are my four.
Looking at all sports and just representatives of the University of Arkansas, I went a completely different direction. I went with four people who are not players. Not one of them is a player. Tony Davis said overall he's got Frank Broyles, Nolan Richardson, Sidney Moncrief, and John McDonnell. He actually said pick him, and then I told him mine, and John McDonnell was on my list, and he picked him up, so his fourth person on the overall list. I've got Frank Broyles, Nolan Richardson, John McDonnell. Weldon made a great point before the show that I thought was very good. And the players have a great impact, but they're only here for 4 years, 4 or 5 years. They play for 4. And guys like John McDonnell, who won 40 national championships in a track, he put Arkansas track on the map. The Tyson Center's not there if not for him. The 40 national championships aren't there if not for him. Just an incredible number to put the Arkansas track on the map. But then on the other side, track's non-revenue producing sport. It doesn't really impact a whole lot. So that was a good point from Weldon. But on my side, John McDonnell is a reason a kid like Alex Green out of Russellville High School is going to college and getting his school paid for because he's a great track athlete, and he's going to the University of Arkansas because of a guy like John McDonnell. So there is an impact to be felt from John McDonnell. You can argue whether or not he belongs on this list.
Just make me look like the bad
No.
guy.
He just had a good point. Yeah. You had a good point. But you can argue whether or not he belongs on the list on his merits. But, I put him there for that reason. The fourth one is the one that I think is the most quote-unquote controversial. Tony disagrees with me. He said he's not sure about my fourth guy, Paul Eels. Nearly 30 years as the voice of the Razorbacks, a guy who instantly identifiable. They're still playing Paul's calls on the radio all the time. He's a guy who is Razorback sports as far as, people look at the Los Angeles Dodgers and what do you think of? Vince Scully calling the games. The Los Angeles Lakers back in the day, you think of Chick Hearn. You think of Jack Buck with the Cardinals. You think of people like these guys who have the radio call, have the TV call, and they're instantly identifiable with that brand. And I think Paul Eels is a guy that as far as I know, Nolan Richardson, Sidney Moncrief, these guys did great things, being great representatives. But for 30 years. He's been here. He was here longer than everybody else, except for maybe John McDonnell as a representative of the team. And he's been a great representative of the University of Arkansas. So I thought that he deserved to be mentioned on my list. He may not be on anybody else's.
I understand that, and okay, I can be the guy on the show who wants to deny little kids scholarships. I'm going to take that role on today because. Look,
I didn't mean anything by that.
I actually think, and this is going to sound bad, I'm actually more on your Paul Eels pick than I am your John McDonnell pick. And I have a lot of respect for Coach McDonnell. He's done a lot of great things. He's won national championships unmatched. But again, I'm looking at your footprint in terms of how you're putting Arkansas athletics on the map. In the track world, he did that. But really, what is the track world when you look at the grand scheme? I just have to be honest. the Sports Center lead off with college track? I mean, it just doesn't. And so for me, I got to look at national appeal. A guy like Corliss, a guy like Nolan Richardson may not have accomplished as much at the university, but what they did accomplish, I think it blew things up for Arkansas. I think it made them big. Paul Eels, you mentioned those great broadcasters from the pro sports teams. Paul Eels did have that impact. You know, if you were coming in from Kentucky or coming in from Texas or somewhere, you knew about Paul Eels. You knew he was a legend. So I can actually go with you on Paul.
Old School Baller asked us a question, because we got to get out of here in just a minute. We're a little over time, but that's all right. He asked us a question, top 4 college basketball coaches and college football coaches ever. So I'll give you a minute to think while I release my
question. I was looking at Maddie.
Top 4 college basketball and college football coaches ever. If you had to Mount Rushmore those guys on the spot, I'll give you my basketball guys real quickly, because those came to me top of my head real quickly. Football is a little tougher.
When did you read the question?
Just a minute ago. Yeah, I just got it here a minute ago. While you were talking, I was working on my list here. But college basketball coaches, it's college basketball coaches. Oh man, dang! I was going all basketball coaches, and I had Red Auerbach and Phil Jackson on my list. They didn't coach college, so I've got John Wooden and Coach K for sure on my top coaches list of college basketball. And I'd probably end up putting Bobby Knight, who I don't like, on my top college coaches of all time. Maybe Dean Smith. I didn't really like him because, you know, although he won national championships, Adolph Rupp's a racist. I don't want anything to do with him. But although Dean Smith won national championships, I always remember that conversation about there's only one person in the world who can hold Michael Jordan under 20 points a game. It's Dean Smith. So I didn't really care for his coaching style too much. But he'd probably be in the conversation because his record for coaching wins has been broken twice by Knight and then Coach K, but he deserves to be in the conversation.
Who told Maddie to turn the music on?
He's trying to shut us up. We're just going to talk through the music.
I'm tired of him because remember I was talking one time and I'm in the middle of my point. He starts the commercial music. Look, your list is great. I can think of a lot of underrated. When I hear that list, I think about a lot of coaches who probably won't make the top 4, but are just really underrated historically. I got Coach K, John Wooden. You got to look at Bob Knight. But then I'm just thinking about a list of other coaches who have been there. I mean, you just look around at the courts around the country who are named, like Coach Iva at Oklahoma State.
Yep.
You look at even
Rupp Arena,
Adolph Rupp, and your boy. Even coaches who are still active. I mean, Jim Boeheim.
Yeah, Jim Boeheim is very underrated.
One of the most underrated coaches in the history of basketball. We may not like him personally. Jim Calhoun, recently retired. This dude had his team in it almost every year. Seemed like he had the same guys every year. Bunch of tall people. That's all.
Long guys.
That's all he had.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Gino Auriemma is another, and Pat Summitt. And those are college basketball coaches. Of course, they're coaching women.
Yeah,
I'll take that for what it's worth. But
that's my list. I got to have some time thinking football. I mean, I'm thinking about the Bear.
Joe Paterno,
Joe Pa,
Houston Nutt.
I got Houston Nutt on my list all day.
Well, when I thought that it was just coaches overall, I had Lombardi on the list. I was trying to think of whether or not I'll put a guy like Shula, who was winning as coach, Tom Landry. Forget you, Bill Belichick. There are a bunch of people, but college football coaches makes it tougher.
And I'm thinking Darryl Royal, John Robinson. You even got to look at Nick Saban. Obviously, is in the conversation. I mean, there's just so many.
Barry Switzer, Bud Wilkinson,
those Oklahoma guys, absolutely. You go out and on the East Coast, Jimmy Johnson, just because Bobby Bowden. So I mean, the list goes on. I'd have to sit down and really decipher, which ones I want to go with.
Look what you're doing to us, Old School Baller.
But hey,
this is fun.
I want to revisit this though, because I'm not giving him a proper answer. I'm just rattling off a bunch of names off the top of my head. I want to do this later.
Let's just
on.
do this every day.
We should do this.
I could sit here and do this all day, every day.
All right. Talk about baseball.
Definitely, we could talk about the baseball mount. All right, Matty, go ahead and play the music. Wait till I'm talking. Play the music. Can't do this to our superstar here in Weldon. You're not gonna be here Friday.
I won't be here Friday.
He's going to be famous up there in Minnesota.
I am. But I'll be back though.
Visit a coaching clinic. All right, we're 9 minutes over. But that's just for all the times Maddie's made us start 2-3 minutes late. So
rollover minutes.
I'll be back on Friday. Don't know who I'm going to have talk with me, but I may just sit here and talk to myself. Just talk to an empty chair. And we'll do some more Mount Rushmores. Who knows? Lots of stuff coming up on Friday. For Weldon and Maddie, I'm Mark, saying so long. Thank you for sticking with us for a little extra time today. We'll be back on Friday at 11 o'clock, hopefully just to noon, with more Sports Blitz.